How do we write the whole equation of a line with just 2 points? So here's our first example. We need to figure out the equation of the line that goes through 0, 1, and 1, 3. Well, to solve this, we're going to be using something called point-slope form. So point-slope form is y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. If that doesn't sound familiar to you, I've actually already made a video on point-slope form that you can watch on the card, but I'll also quickly review it right here. So there's two important things that we need to find to be able to do point-slope form. We have m. M is the slope because for some reason they decided the letter m means slope. And we have x1 and y1. So the problem actually already gives us a lot of the information we need. X1 and Y1 can either be 0 and 1, or they can be 1 and 3. It doesn't matter. You can choose either one. Any point on the line is fine. So we're going to find the slope using the slope formula. And I've actually also already made a video on the slope formula. So if you're not quite familiar with that, you can watch the video on the card, but I'll quickly review it here as well. So the slope formula lets us find the slope of any line just as long as we have 2 points, which we do. They're right here, 0, 1, and 1, 3. So y2 means the y of the second point. Well, the second point is right here, 1, 3, and y is the number to the right because x is the number to the left. So in this case, that would be 3. So we're going to put 3 here for y2. Now y1 is the y of the first point. Well, here's the first point. 0, 1 is the first point. And the y of that point is 1 because it's the number to the right. So we're going to put in 1. Now we need to find the x of the second point. Here's the second point. The x is 1. And now the x of the first point. The first point's right here. And x is the one to the left, which is 0. So now we just need to do the subtraction. 3 minus 1 is 2, and 1 minus 0 is 1. And then 2 divided by 1 is just 2. So now we know that m is going to be 2 when we replace it in our equation. And since we already have x1 and y1 because they're a point, then we can just start our point-slope form. So let's start writing our point-slope form, replacing everything that we know. Remember that x and y just stay the same. They're going to stay as x and y in the equation. So we have y minus, and then y1. We know what y1 is. I'm going to choose this point to use just because they're smaller numbers and it'll make it easier. So y1 is the y, so that's 1. We know what m is. We just figured it out that m is 2. X stays the same. And then x1 is going to be the x of this point. And the x is 0, so we're going to put 0. So normally here you would have to do distributive property because, you have to multiply by both parts in the parentheses. But I feel like an easier way to do this would just be to see that this is x minus 0, and x minus 0 was just x. The minus 0 wasn't doing anything. So let's go ahead and change x minus 0 to just x. So now we have a nice equation, and our last step is to get this into slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So basically all we have to do is get y by itself. We have to isolate y, and we'll automatically have it in this format. So how can we get y by itself? Well, we have a minus 1 here, so we should do the opposite of minus 1, which is plus 1. So we add 1 to both sides. On this side, we are just left with y. And on this side, we are left with 2x plus 1. So our final equation is y equals 2x plus 1. All right, here's another example. We've got some negative numbers in this one. We need to figure out the equation of the line that passes through -2, -2, and 4, 1. So we're going to do this the same way. We're going to use point-slope form. And to do that, we need to figure out m, because we already have x1 and y1 there right here. So we're going to use our handy-dandy slope formula. So first, y2. y2 is the y of the second point. Our second point is here, 4, 1. So the y of this point is going to be 1, because it's the number to the right. Now y1, the y of the first point. Here's the first point. The y is -2. And notice how we have two negative signs here. Remember, this has a negative sign, but there's already a negative sign in the slope formula. So we need to have two negative signs. And I'm going to go ahead and put this in parentheses, just so that we remember that these are two separate negative signs. x2 is the x of the second point. Here's the second point. The x is the one to the left, so 4. And x1 is the x of the first point. Here's the first point, and the x is -2. And we'll go ahead and put this in parentheses as well, just to remember the same thing. So now remember, we have two negative signs here, and that can be confusing, but remember, two negatives just make a positive. So let's go ahead and change all these to positives. So right now we have 1 plus 2 and 4 plus 2. Well, 1 plus 2 is 3. and 4 plus 2 is 6. Now, 3 over 6 can be simplified. If we divide both the top and the bottom by 3, then it will simplify to 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. If you didn't immediately see that, then I think the good way to think about it is 3 is half of 6. So, like, 6 slices of pizza, 3 slices would be half the pizza. If you see something like this, then you immediately know that it's going to simplify to 1/2. So our slope here is 1/2, and that's going to be what goes in for m. So we have all the information we need. Let's go ahead and do point slope form. So y minus y1. y1 is the y of, you can actually choose either point. I'm actually going to go with this point because there's no negative numbers in it, so that'll probably make our lives easier. So y1 is going to be 1, the one to the right. Now m, we just figured out that m is 1/2, so let's do 1/2. X minus, and then x1. Remember, we're doing this point. You can't, this is a big mistake. You cannot switch points in between. You can't say, oh, well, y1, I like this y, so I'm going to go with this one. But then when you get to x1, you're like, oh, but I want to do this point now. You have to stay consistent with which point you're using. So we have to use this x right here, 4. So remember, our goal now is to try to get this into slope-intercept form. So we need to get y by itself on the side of the equation. And our first step in simplifying this down is to do the distributive property right here. Remember, when there's a number on the outside of parentheses like this, you have to multiply to each part of the parentheses. So 1/2 times x is just 1/2 times x. That doesn't change, right? Because you can't multiply a number and a letter. They just stay like this. And 1/2 times -4. Don't forget the negative, right? Well, 1/2 times 4, if you expanded it out as a fraction, you could do that. Remember, 4 is just 4 over 1. 1 times 4 is 4, and 2 times 1 is 2. And 4 over 2 is 2, 4 divided by 2. But you didn't even actually have to do this. You could have just looked here and seen 1/2 times 4. Remember, fractions are just division. So 1/2 times 4 literally just means 4 over 2. So remember, we need to keep the minus sign. So it's going to be -2, like we figured out here. So our final step in getting y by itself is to get rid of this -1. And we'll do that by doing the opposite of minus, which is plus. So y is now by itself because these cancel out. And on this side, we have 1 over 2x, and then -2 plus 1. So you lost $2, and then you gained $1. So you still are down $1, so that would be -1. So our final equation is y equals 1/2 x minus 1. Here's another example. What I'd like you to do is go ahead and pause the video, try to solve it yourself, and then unpause and see how you did. All right, so we need to figure out the equation of the line that passes through -1, 6, and 1, 0. We'll still be using point slope form, so we need to figure out m, which is slope. Slope. So we'll use our slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So y2 is the y of the second point. Here's the second point. The y is 0. y1 is the y of the first point. Here's the first point, and the y is 6. x2, the x of the second point. Here's the x of the second point, which is 1. And x1, the x of the first point. Here's the first point. The x is -1. And we're going to go ahead and put parentheses around this because these are two different negative signs. I mean, you don't have to, but it helps you realize that these are two different signs. So let's go ahead and do the subtraction. 0 minus 6 is -6. And two negative signs here. Remember, these make a positive. So we're left with 1 plus 1, which is 2. So now 6 divided by 2 is 3. But we do have a negative sign here, so that we have to put that here in the answer as well. And our final m is -3. So we have everything that we need to do point slope form. So let's go ahead and plug in what we know. Y minus y1 is the y of a point. I'm going to choose this point because there's no negative numbers in it and they're smaller, just makes things easier. So the y of this point is 0. Now m is -3. That's what we just figured out. X stays the same. Remember, x and y are going to stay the same in every equation. And then x1, we have to do the same point we used last time. So remember this one. We'll do the x of that point, which is 1. So you may notice that this -0 here isn't doing anything, so we can actually just cross this out. And we now have y by itself. But we still need to simplify this down with the distributive property. Remember, we need to multiply this -3 to both parts of the parentheses. -3 times x is just -3x. And now we have -3 times -1. Remember, when you're multiplying or dividing, two negatives make a positive. So -3 and -1, you can just act like these are positive. 3 times 1 is 3. And that's actually our final equation. There aren't any more steps to do because y is already by itself. This is already in the form y equals mx plus b. Here's one more example. Go ahead and pause the video, try to solve it yourself, and then unpause and see how you did. So we're going to figure out m using our slope formula like before. So y2 is the y of the second point. The y is 1. y1 is the y of the first point. Here's the first point, and the y is 3. x2 is the x of the second point. Here's the second point, and the x is 4. And x1 is the x of the first point. Here's the first point, and the x is 3. So now we just need to do the subtraction. 1 minus 3 is -2. Remember, you earned $1 and then lost $3, so you were down $2. 4 minus 3 is 1, and anything over 1 is just itself. So -2 divided by 1 is just -2. So our final m is -2. So let's go ahead and plug what we know into point slope form and see what we get. So y1, I'll go ahead and use this point because why not? The y of this point is 3. And now m, we've already figured out m, which is -2. X stays the same. And now the x of this point that we used before, x is 3. So now we just need to do distributive property. So -2 times x is just going to be -2 times x. And we have two negative signs here. So remember, these are a positive. So 2 times 3 is 6. So it's going to be plus 6. So now our final step is to get y by itself so that we can get the y equals mx plus b equation. So we're going to get rid of this -3 by doing the opposite of minus, which is plus. So on this side, we just have y because these cancel out. And on this side, we have -2x, and then we have 6 plus 3, which is 9. So our final equation is y equals -2x plus 9. I know that seemed like a lot of steps, but just keep practicing it and you'll get the hang of it and be able to do it a lot faster. And just remember that a lot of these things are things that you've probably already learned and you're just starting to mesh them together into one problem. But the next step of being able to write the equations of lines is finding the line with one point and the parallel or perpendicular line, which is where a lot of students get really confused. But it doesn't actually have to be that hard. If you want to know how to do it, then you can watch this video right here. And as always, go ahead and leave a comment if you're confused about anything in this video, and I'll be sure to answer your question. Thanks for watching.